We're in front of the Israeli School, Universal Practical Knowledge, the Philadelphia Division, here at 3226 Cheltenham Avenue in Philadelphia. We're standing in front of the school right now, getting a description of the 12 tribe sign that's been painted by one of the brothers that was in the school: Judah, Benjamin, Levi, Simeon, Zebulun, Ephraim, Manasseh, Gad, Reuben, Naphtali, Asher, and Issachar. Those are the 12 tribes of Israel.
Shalom. Shalom. You've been waiting for this day, so this day has finally come. A lot of you have been wondering where this knowledge that you've been hearing is coming from, and the powerful truth that you've been hearing, how this was established. Well, we finally were able to arrange for the priests to come down from New York and spend some time with us. And I'd like to introduce them if I can. These are some great brothers. We're very glad to have them with us. We want to make them feel as warm as possible, because this is their work and the extension of their work and what they've laid down some time ago. I'd like to introduce, first of all, priest and Sixth Shield General, 4th in command in the nation of Israel, Lahab. I'd like to salute this brother. March up. Barak. Yeshabim, which means sit. And I'm going to turn it over now to Priest General Lahab.
Come on, brother. I'd like to say this, starting off, we're very impressed at your school here, and we're very impressed to see that the brothers and sisters in Philadelphia think enough of the Most High and the Bible and the truth and your nationality to be a part of this, because most of the brothers and sisters are running from the truth.
Hey, shalom, shalom. What's going on, Israel? Give me 1 second, just doing a quick mic check. Mic check. Want to make sure our sound is good. Okay, mic check, mic check. Let's see if the sound is good. Okay, mic check, mic check. All right, the sound's good. Hey, shalom on Christ, Barak. Yeah, I'm just starting class right now. Okay, kind of. Yeah, Lord Christ. All right. What's going on, Israel? We got the sound's good, video's good, audio's good. All right, we got a Monday night history class taught by myself, priest and officer of 1,000 Shar Yawan under commanding General Yohana. We are the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, okay, which was started out of 1 West, 125th Street, Harlem, New York. Okay, tonight's class, I got it titled, What is Canada Hiding? Canadian History. Okay, what is Canada hiding Canadian history? Okay, it's going to be a interesting class. We'll get through some articles, read some information. This history class, damn near gonna start a series, if I could call it that. I'm gonna bring something to Canada, bring something to Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous inside Canada. You know what I mean? Lord allow some information that they've never heard before, some information that could be life changing. All right, I'm gonna bring out some valuable information. Most importantly, this class is taught from the lens of a Black man. Okay, history, for so long is always taught by the victor of the war. You know what I mean? What do they call it? His story. What's very sad is Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous history has been told and taught to us by Europeans, which is very disturbing. There's a verse in Deuteronomy. Let me pull it out. I'll share my screen. In Deuteronomy 32 and verse 7. Okay, this is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 32 and verse 7, and it says, "Remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee, thy elders, and they will tell thee." Now, why is it that Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous, why do we accept history told to us by Europeans? Why do we allow our history and our records to be told to us by the lens of a people that have colonized us? Why do we allow these people that have raped, robbed, and murdered so many of our people to be the people that we look to tell us who our identity is? It's a very twisted way of thinking. What we should have done inside of Canada growing up is we should have questioned, where this history is coming from, how true this history is. Okay, I remember growing up, and I had the genuine belief that my people came from Africa. We were swinging from tree to tree in some forest inside of Africa somewhere, walking around butt naked, uncivilized, no culture. These are the things that I believed growing up as a Black man inside of Canada. As I got older, I learned that Indigenous inside of Canada were taught the exact same thing. They're called Native Indian, meaning the original savage of this land. There's words used to degrade us. That's why, some Indigenous people, they don't want to be called Native Indian, because they understand the oppressive ideologies that are put on us inside of Canada. So they asked to be called things like First Nations or Indigenous to the land, because they start to reevaluate what this cruel bastard that colonized us has put on us for hundreds of years. Deuteronomy says to remember the days of old and to ask your forefathers. Ask your forefathers about your history. Ask another black or Hispanic man about your history. Don't go to a man that has abused you for hundreds of years inside of Canada to learn about your history. That doesn't make any sense. And when you do that, you take on the perception that he has on you as a people. All right. And so these are the things that we have to shake off, you know, these teachings that we've learned inside of Canada. The Bible says to ask your forefathers, ask another black or Hispanic man about your culture. Okay. I'm going to start off with, let's take a look at this video of an indigenous community that was found, inside of or near Toronto. Okay, I believe this place is actually, let me see, it's a place called Huron Village. Let me look up the geography on it. Huron Village. If I look at a map, well, I'm not sure if this is the same place. Well, what we're going to learn is that there's this place called Huron Village that was found near Toronto. I believe it was just outside of Toronto, or what is now known as Toronto. As a community of where indigenous people lived. All right. Give me 1 second. Let me get this video up. All right, Salakia. So this is a village that was found, near Toronto. Okay. Let's play this.
An incredible discovery is made.
This is an Indiana Jones moment. This is huge.
A 500-year-old Huron settlement that changes our understanding of North America before European contact.
So this is a settlement found, that predates what they would call European contact with First Nations people inside of Canada.
It shocks the archaeologists that find it.
The most complex village ever in northeastern.
Now, hear this. It says it shocks the archaeologists that find it. Why would it shock archaeologists that found this site? It shocked them because this isn't something that they knew about indigenous peoples inside of Canada before finding this archaeology. And maybe, maybe there's files somewhere of Canadian history, which we'll get into, that speaks about things like this, but to the average European growing up inside of Canada, what they're taught historically about indigenous people, they can't fathom that a community that they've found this complex would ever exist inside of Canada. They can't fathom that. Why? Because they believe things like you're a native Indian. You're the original savage. You're a person who's uncivilized. You're a person who, lacks technology and infrastructure and, engineering and the ability or the mind to build a civilization. They can't comprehend that you could do something like this in the 15th century.
North America. The most number of artifacts, the largest number of longhouses. Who the heck are these people? I've never.
They're saying, who the hell are these people? We found something so, so incredible that goes against the grain of what we were taught about indigenous people that we just sitting here mind blown.
Never seen anything quite like this.
But within this mystery lies another. An object is found that does not belong.
The object has a spirit.
That is very cool.
But where did it come from?
It's incredibly thrilling to hold this piece.
And what was its impact? The answers change history.
These things that they found change history. That's what they're sitting here saying. They found something. This documentary was put out 2 years ago. They found something that changed history. Everything that they've ever written about indigenous people. The things that they wrote down in the history books and have been teaching your children. They probably still teach your children to this day certain viewpoints on indigenous people. They're still teaching that, we're the original savage, these uncivilized people. This finding right here, they're saying it changed history. Now, again, understand what's so powerful about this history class is this is history told by Blacks, Hispanics, and indigenous people. This Monday night history class in the ISUPK, we're not telling you history from the lens of a European. We're telling you history from the lens of a Black man. We find something like this, we look at it and we say, yeah, we know. We're not surprised. We know the history of who we are. But to some European boy growing up inside of Canada, he's just mind blown.
That piece brought bad luck to my people.
Let's see if I can fast forward a little.
Was anything but ordinary.
This is an Indiana Jones moment. This is huge. Mantle was a phone call coming into the office, and it was, Ron, you're not going to believe this. It's huge. We've got a village.
When we were out walking over the surface of this field, what we usually do is place a little flag in the ground every time we find an artifact. And so we're walking, we're placing flags in the ground, and more flags, and more flags. And all of a sudden we look behind us and just realize that the entire field was now covered with flags. And there was stuff everywhere. The material was so dense on the ground. On that day, we really knew that this site was going to be something special.
When I arrived there, I don't think I was prepared for what I saw.
Now, what you're looking at, what they found is damn near 10 acres worth of land that was once a small village of indigenous people.
Immediately, I knew we had this absolutely massive village. Staring at that field and staring at all of those flags, what I was looking at in the ground, I'd never seen in my career.
So what these white boys find is a massive village. Now, number one, why would this shake up the mind of a white man? Why would this, trouble the mind of some European woman? These are historians. These are, archaeologists. These are people that are going to write a book that the world is going to read and, take in the information that they're saying as some great, historian or archaeologist found this regarding indigenous people and this and that. And it's so stupid as hell for us to sit here and listen to these people. Like, they're so mind blown at the fact that, wait a minute, a group of indigenous people had a massive village inside of Toronto? Wait a minute, are you telling me that, and you see even in this video, they always love to portray us, which, always blows my mind, as a people walking around with no goddamn clothes on. Every time they, pull up a Roots video on black slavery or video of indigenous people, what we're doing in the 14th and 15th century, they always got us dressed so goddamn naked. Because in their mind, we're these uncivilized people who were not even intelligent enough to make clothing. That's truly what they think. They find a massive village and they're like, wait a minute, you mean these indigenous people are just living off the land as nomadic people, just constantly roaming and, never stationary? You mean to tell me that indigenous people in Canada weren't swinging off trees like monkeys? Living in the trees, hiding from whatever wildlife, and you mean to tell me that an indigenous man had a village? That is unbelievable to the mind of a white man because of what he's learned about First Nations history.
That's the moment that I take it from kind of that two-dimensional football field of flags, and in my mind create the three-dimensional community that was there. And in recreating kind of that scene of it as longhouses and palisade, I'm thinking, what an incredible scene this would have been 500 years ago. The people that lived in this place, who the heck are these people?
Who the heck are these people? They're not the savages that I learned about. God forbid. God forbid they have a village.
In order to find out, Ron initiates the largest archaeological dig his team has ever undertaken. and evidence of who these people were starts to emerge from the soil.
It's a castellation.
Oh.
Whoa.
To Ron, the very distinct diagonal designs on the pottery are unmistakable.
Oh my God. Right there. That might be
A similar
the similar thing. It's not a lot of difference between that and this, and you see that kind of punctate here and the punctates here.
The patterns on the pottery tell Ron that the people who lived here belonged to a group called the Wendat. Before the Europeans arrived, in a period known as pre-contact, the Wendat were one of the most prominent and powerful nations on the continent. Today, they are known as the Huron. For the last 30 years, Ron has excavated Huron sites and is a leading authority on their history and culture.
Damn. This devil right here is the leading historian on the Huron people's culture. Do you know how disturbing that is? That the people that colonized us, they're the leading people on our culture. It's a very dangerous time for Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous. Like, we're supposed to be in 2026 where, you know, everybody's equal, everybody's freedom everywhere. We all have equal opportunity and the ability to, you know, be great in this society. And you telling me that the leading authority on indigenous culture is some devil? He finds some pottery and he's like, yeah, that's the Wendat people. I know these people. Well, if you knew them so well as you claim and society claims, you're the leading historian, but yet you so goddamn shocked at what you're finding. Maybe you don't know them that well.
It's an incredibly rich area.
He knows that at the beginning of the 16th century, their population was around 15,000. They lived in small villages of 300 to 400 people that were dotted along the north shore of Lake Ontario. They lived in dwellings called longhouses, and their villages were often surrounded by a defensive wall called a palisade.
Whoa, man, amazing.
Forgive me on these ads.
Right here. What does it look like? I think it's a post hole. Well, let's just uncover it a bit more. I wonder if this is some kind of wall or something.
Watch.
Ron, do you want to have a look at this?
What do you got?
I think we have a palisade.
You got a whole row?
It looks, yeah.
Wow.
If I can fast forward a little bit.
Ron and Andrea are on the verge of making a discovery that could rewrite history.
This is a big deal. Because this is the moment we're going to know. I just asked, will you know if it's cast or rot? He said, yeah, in a heartbeat. So, in a minute, there's going to be a heartbeat. And mine will either stop beating or beat very quickly.
So we'll put that back. And we'll see what we have.
All right.
So I'm just going to save the image so that we can open it up and have a look at it. you looked at, just kind of gives you a general overview. We can see the scaling around the outside.
Yeah.
But,
When you say scaling, you mean
yeah,
that's,
that's the rust.
corrosion.
That's the corrosion on the outside.
And
You
that
see
white is the solid metal.
That's the solid.
So
that's all the solid mass.
So the big issue is this wrought or cast?
Well, that doesn't look cast to me.
No, it's not porous enough to be cast.
Yes!
If it was cast, it would be very porous.
That just does not look like a cast.
No. Not at all.
Oh, yes! Yes. Yes.
I think what we can do is probably.
That is so cool. This is, George, you know, basically we've just changed history.
Damn, he says we've just changed history. They find one piece of artifact, and all of a sudden, it's going to rewrite history. There's something very diabolic. Something very diabolical that the Canadian government did to Indigenous peoples inside Canada. I think it was around the 1940s to 1950s. They had segregated hospitals where they were testing Indigenous people that were sick. They were just using them as test subjects, unknowingly, against their will. And this is how they view us as a people. Like they don't. There was a thing called chattel slavery. Chattel meaning your inventory. You see in the United States how they were changing laws saying that the black man is 3/5 of a human being. Europeans don't look at blacks, Hispanics, and indigenous as just regular people. Like we damn near test subjects to them. They find one goddamn artifact, and all of a sudden, this man is, you know, just excited as hell. Now we're gonna rewrite history. The lack of compassion that these white people have for indigenous people is absolutely insane. They had any compassion at all, they wouldn't write anything about us in a history book and publish it for the world to see. They sitting here teaching you about, they're sitting here teaching Canadians about indigenous history as if it's some goddamn joke. Hey, we found these savages living in North America, and when we ran into them, they're doing this and doing that. Let's write this in a book. Oh, they were doing this and that. Oh, these people are uncivilized. These people are monsters. These people are this. These people are that. And let's write this down in a book, and let's teach our children about how savage indigenous people are. Another 100 years go by. Oh shit, we found another artifact. This is going to rewrite history. We're going to change the history books of indigenous people inside of Canada. We should not learn history about who we are from Europeans. We should not. We should not listen to a thing that they have to say about us when it comes to our history. I'm gonna jump up a bit on this video. You know what I mean? And then we'll get into another article.
Building.
Mantle originally looked like. They removed the longhouses they believe were built later.
So kill the other two that overlap with that one.
Yeah. Turn off house 9
And 10B.
and 10B and just leave house 10A.
Holy, we have a village.
We do.
We have a village
Very well
emerging.
planned village.
The thing about men.
They said we got a village. We got a very well planned village. Oh my goodness. These indigenous people have some intelligence to them. They put a village together that was planned. That's why we should never learn history about who we are from these people.
Mantle that's so startling. It's like a perfect row of houses around a plaza. And what that taught us is that there was actually, I can see the council, the leaders of the community getting together and planning this community, like urban planning.
Manil's level of organization is greater than any village that came before it.
The parents and grandparents of the people who lived at Mantle. You know, these guys started out 100 years previously living in very small villages that maybe had a population of 300, 350 people, maybe living in 4 longhouses.
Eventually, the Huron built slightly larger villages, but still they lacked Manil's size and design.
When they decide to pick up and move to Mantle, they decide that instead of living in small house groups, they're going to have one completely organized layout of the settlement in this radial pattern that we're seeing here.
Each 100-foot longhouse is parallel to the next and radiates out from a central square, a design similar to a European town of the same period.
And this is the important part of what they're saying that is making them, you know, freak out in their small European minds. They're like, wait a minute. Hold up. These indigenous people, they built a village similar to a European village. How could they be as intelligent as a European civilization? That's their view. Their very small-minded view of who we are. And if they don't believe that's who we are, that's for damn sure what they were taught. Because there's this myth, and I'm calling it a myth, that Europeans came over here and taught us how to be civil. Europeans came over to Canada and built this great civilization that they themselves engineered. Urban planning, as we want to call it in 2026. Urban planning and development. No way indigenous people could have did that. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 6. I had brought up earlier Deuteronomy 32 where it says to ask your forefathers. Remember the days of old. Ask your forefathers. What Blacks, Hispanics, and indigenous people should do is we need to look to our ancestors to learn about our history. That's something we have to do. you know, you tuning in for the first time, you stick around long enough, you know what I mean? ISUPK, we're going to teach you exactly who you are and where you come from. Too many of us don't know that Moses was one of our forefathers. That Job, Ruth, Rebecca, Jeremiah, all the prophets in the Bible, Solomon, David, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Amos, Hosea, Malachi, Obadiah, all these men that we read about in the Bible, nobody ever told us that these were our forefathers. We were colonized as a people. Our language was beaten out of us. Our culture, our history, our identity, to the point of being taught that we were savages. That's what we're taught. Not understanding. You ask your ancestor Moses about who you are. He says, "For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God." Moses is calling blacks, Hispanics, and indigenous holy. Calling the children of Israel holy. He's not calling Africans holy. He's not calling Europeans holy. He's not calling Asians holy, East Indians holy. He's saying, "For thou art an holy people." The children of Israel. Holy means separate. Holy means set apart. Holy means different. The nation of Israel is different from every other race of people. That's what your ancestor, your forefather, your uncle, your great-grandfather had to say about you. And he wrote down in a book what the Most High God told him to write down. This is even bigger than what Moses wrote down. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that the entire earth, damn near believes in, said that Israel is a holy people. It says, "The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself." Not only are we different, but there's something special about us. Something special. That devil sitting there talking about our history, saying, "Oh my goodness, they put a massive village together." As if that was, something remarkable in his eyes. And he's looking at it saying, "Damn, they built something like we built over in Europe during that time." Matter of fact, when you look into this, that place that was built by the indigenous, it says that village was larger than any European village they'd ever seen at that time. Not equivalent, but bigger. What does that mean? Indigenous are better. Indigenous people are special. Indigenous people are holy. Moses said, "Above all people that are upon the face of the earth. That's what Moses had to say about the children of Israel, that we were above all people on the face of the earth. I'm going to share my screen on something. Just to read a quick AI overview. Might have to teach a whole class on this, because you listen to some white boy, you're going to tell you, oh my God, you guys built a village that could, house over 2,000 people. Estimating. They got, 95 longhouses and, this wooden barrier or fence or barricade around this village. They had a place of protection. They had guards. They had, places to store food. I forget what they called it in Canada. It was a type of corn. They found it all throughout this village. This village needed 300 pounds of it a day to survive, and they had these massive infrastructures to, house all this food. That white boy's going crazy. We rewriting Canadian history, rewriting Indigenous history on what we knew about them inside of Canada. Because God forbid they were, it definitely couldn't have been on our level. Here's something that says, archaeological breakthroughs and cutting-edge technology are fundamentally changing the historical record, revealing that pre-Columbian native societies in rainforests, such as the Amazon and the Maya in Central America, were highly complex, massive, and deeply engineered, contrary to early beliefs that they were just small, scattered hunter-gatherer groups. These ancient civilizations reshaped their environments through deep structural engineering and landscape management. Massive urban centers and infrastructure in the Bolivian Amazon, the eastern parts of Ecuador. This is sprawling networks of monumental lost cities that date back roughly 2,500 years. These densely populated urban centers feature 6,000 plus earthen housing platforms, sunken plazas, and over 600 miles of wide, straight, engineered roads and canals. They had sustainable farming and soil engineering. Societal collapse at these pre-Columbian networks supported populations numbering in the millions. You had indigenous communities, populations numbering in the millions before European contact. Let me tell you something. Now, ISUPK, we say that the white man, it's like, let me not get banned on YouTube. I know you Europeans are a little sensitive. ISUPK, we teach that our oppressor is the devil that the Bible speaks of. What does it mean to be a devil? It means to be a deceiver. European has deceived the earth with all his goddamn lies. He just lies every second of the day. Everything that he says, everything he teaches, all of it is a goddamn lie. Understand that, Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous, man. Your oppressor is a liar. Bible says the father of lies. Cannot trust these people for anything. Indigenous people in Americas, we had civilizations that had millions of people in those civilizations. How do you think we got up to Canada? All the different trade routes that we built in North and South Central America. All the different routes, we made it all through the different islands. You think they just got to Jamaica and nobody was there? And indigenous people inside of Jamaica, inside of Trinidad, inside of the Bahamas, all the different Caribbean islands, all the way up to Canada. And we were extremely intelligent. Let me see if I can pull up an article on. There's a man named Etienne Brule, some French dude, some French bastard who is known inside of Canada for being like the first man to make contact, the first European man to make contact with indigenous peoples inside Canada. It's a man named Etienne Brule. It says, was the first European explorer to journey beyond the St. Lawrence River. He lived from 1592 to June 1633 into what is now known as Canada. He spent much of his early adult life among the Wendat, Huron. That's the tribe we were just speaking on that built that massive civilization and mastered their language and learned their culture. Brule became an interpreter and guide for Samuel de Champlain, who later sent Brule on a number of exploratory missions, among which he is thought to have preceded Champlain to the Great Lakes, reuniting with him upon Champlain's first arrival at Lake Huron. Among his many travels were explorations of Georgian Bay and Lake Huron. All right, let me go down. Early life in France. Life in New France. New France is, parts of what is called Canada. It says Champlain wrote of a youth who had been living in New France since 1608. And so this is the man, Champlain is the man who wrote about that French bastard who was, sent to live amongst the Wendat. He said he spoke of a young man named Brule. In June 1610, Brule told Champlain that he wished to go and live with the Algonquins, learn their language and better understand their customs and habits. Champlain arranged for him to do so, and in return, the chief Iroquois, an Algonquin leader of the Petite Nation who wintered his people near Huronia, requested that Champlain take Savenant, a young Wendat, with him to teach him the customs and habits of the French. Champlain instructed Brule to learn the Wendat language, explore the country, establish good relations, and report back in 1 year's time. Champlain returned to visit Brule, who astonishingly had done all that Champlain had asked of him. Brule now dressed like an indigenous person and was extremely pleased with the way he was treated and all that he had learned. So, wait a minute, these people are so savage-like. Why are you why are you writing in your diaries of how pleased you were treated by these savages? It says Champlain requested that Brule continue to live among the indigenous peoples so that he could fully master everything. For 4 years, Champlain had no connection or communication with Brule. It is thought was then the first European to see the Great Lakes. In 1615, they met again at Urania. There, Brule informed Champlain of his adventures and explorations through North America. Let me jump down. See if we can get to where he, spoke about the Wendat people. Talk about the fur traders. Talks about how he taught Champlain to, how to destroy the Wendat. Okay, that's it on this. So this man right here, he spoke on his dealings with the indigenous. What's his name? His name's Etienne Brule. Let's see if I can do a quick AI search. So here's a quick AI overview. Why is it shared still? It says he has a praise for treatment. Spoke on the cultural adoption, the rejection of European customs, cross-cultural kinship, it might be a book that he had written. I'll have to do another class on that, where he spoke on how, basically how civilized and how intelligent the indigenous peoples were. I mean, this is in some of his encounters, his first encounters with the Wendat people. Let me get into this next article, because this is something important to understand about Canadian history. This is an article from CBC News. Okay, this was posted back in 2017. It says the government accused of hoarding Canadian history in secret archives. Okay. This is something that the Canadian government has been accused of. And let me tie this into that last article. Let's see where I got this here. Yeah, this is a perfect article. Before I read this one, let me read something that you can find on the Canadian Encyclopedia. Okay, this is on the that site that they found, that Wendat site. It says Toronto feature Huron-Wendat Village. Okay, this is the village that they found. Okay. It says strength in numbers, Huron-Wendat Village. The Parsons site, which is named for a landowner, covers a grassy hydro corridor in North York. Okay, so this is where the Wendat Village was. It's in North York. Okay, for those that don't know Toronto, North York is, just the what would they call it? The uptown, not the downtown. You know what I mean? Not the downtown of Toronto, but the uptown Toronto. Okay? North York is in uptown Toronto. That's where this village that they found. Okay? So it covers a grassy hydro corridor in North York, overlooking Black Creek that was around 1540, a thriving Huron-Wendat village, yielding more than 250,000 artifacts to archaeologists. The site may hold the secret to a pivotal period in the history of its occupants. Now, when I say that our oppressor is the devil, they found 250,000 artifacts. Now, mind you, they'll say a lot of those pieces are just, broken pieces. You know what I mean? Maybe you have a bowl that was, broken to 10 pieces. However many pieces a bowl or pottery would be broken into. They found over 250,000 artifacts inside of this place. It says archaeologists began excavating the Parsons site in 1952. The most recent dig in 1989 to 1990 cleared a trench through the site to make way for underground services. That trench alone revealed the remains of 10 longhouses, a number of underground sweat lodges, a surrounding palisade, and 4 middens. The village was at least twice the size of earlier documented villages, sites at the Humber River. You know what I mean? They don't tell you about all the sewage system that they had in this village. I mean, how many times I hear white people say, well, we gave indigenous and blacks sewage. Well, that, according to history, that is a lie. They found that in North York itself. It says it suggests that the village may, in fact, have compromised people from a number of smaller, earlier villages who may have come together to benefit from the strength in numbers. Okay? So they had, and this is to the point I wanted to make, they have found over 250,000 artifacts. Let me check with Google really quick. Let's see what Google AI says. How many of the 250,000 artifacts found at the Huron-Wendat village have been released to the public? Here's a quick AI overview. Out of the 250,000, it says only a tiny fraction, estimated to be significantly less than 5% of the 250,000 artifacts have ever been released or displayed to the general public. Ooh, good night. What's the title of this class? What is Canada hiding? What is Canada hiding? they found 250,000 artifacts. And out of 250,000, less than 5%. What is 5% of 250,000? That is, let's see, that's 12,500 artifacts. Now you better believe in the ISUPK. I'm gonna go through all these artifacts and I'm gonna investigate the hell out of this because I want to know about my people. Shoot, ISUPK Toronto. We're gonna be in you're gonna be at a powwow in Toronto. I mean, I think not this Saturday, but next. Let me see the date. Oh, it's going to be this Saturday, ISUPK Toronto. We're going to be at a powwow inside of Toronto. Why? Because we love our people. I'm going to investigate for my people. I'm going to look into these artifacts. Because I want to know about my people's history. I want to know more about the Gadites, the North American Indians inside of Canada. There's an article from CBC. It says the government accused of hoarding Canadian history and secret archives. Some of Canada's leading historians say the federal government is putting the country's historical record at risk by hoarding piles of documents inside secret archives that together would make a stack taller than the CN Tower. What's going on, Canada? You telling me that historians, Canada's leading historians, say that there is so much goddamn history and documented history of Canada's past, that stack of paper would reach higher than the CN Tower. You from Toronto, you know how tall that CN Tower is. Once upon a time, that was the tallest building in the entire earth. That building is pretty tall. That's how much history, documented history, Canadian government has not released to the public. 250,000 artifacts of my people's history sitting inside of a museum somewhere that nobody is allowed to see or has access to. Says historian Dennis Molinaro of Trent University discovered ministries and agencies are stockpiling millions of decades of old papers rather than handing them over to Library and Archives Canada for safekeeping and public access. He's launched a petition to try to convince the government to set them free. We want to know about Canada's history. He says it's very disturbing that there are caches of documents, but which we know very little. We don't even know the extent of this, said CHA President Joan Sangster, a colleague of Molinaro's at Trent in Peterborough, Ontario, where she teaches labor of women's history. And as part of his research, Molinaro has been asking government departments to hand over information about Canada's Cold War domestic spy and surveillance programs run by the RCMP. Last fall, the federal government initially refused his access to information requests for the papers concerning a 65-year-old top secret RCMP wiretapping program. Canada's got some secrets. They got some secrets. He says access to information officials have told Molinaro the Privy Council office holds at least 1.6 million more pages from the era, many of which could concern Cold War counter-espionage programs. He's also learned many more intelligence-related records dating back 4, 5, and 6 decades are being held by the Communications Security Establishment and the Departments of Justice and Foreign Affairs. Now, how does this, have anything to do with, let me, bridge the gap a little bit when it comes to, some of the things that they taught about Indigenous people, some of the things they say about Indigenous people. Okay. Let me see. Shoot, there's a picture of the, they say how much documents they got stacking up, man. It's a lot of paperwork. If you go to, let me see. There's something that they call the 30-year rule. This is something that other, European governments have established in their government. Canada does not have a 30-year rule. Basically, a 30-year rule is they say once a document is 30 years old, it should be released to the public. It says, ranking a legal scholar and the NDP's House leader says Canada has failed to impose any legal requirements to force government departments to release historical records to public archivists within a certain time frame, similar to the 30-year rule in place in other Western countries. Canada does not do this. Now, there's something interesting, and this is what I want to jump down to. Okay, he says, this is what Monario, whatever the devil's name is calling for. He says, this is an issue for all Canadians, not just historians. Our country is 150 years old now. Rankin said it's time for us to understand what we have as a history. He said many Canadians grew up thinking, for example, that the treatment of First Nations was benign. But he says that changed in part because of the work of historians and archival research, including books like Clearing the Plains, which revealed the devastating treatment of Indigenous peoples as the West was settled. So what is he saying right here? Not only is Canada not releasing all these documents speaking on the history, forgive me, we sitting here saying that not only is Canada hiding or not releasing all these documents to the public, but because of activists like him, because of historians who are, fighting tooth and nail to see Canada's history and all the documents they have on our people, they were able to learn about, some of the things that the Canadian government did to Indigenous people. So these documents aren't just what something happened during a Cold War and some Russian spies and this and that. They went into these documents, and there was a man who was able to write a book called Clearing the Plains. going to read a little about what Clearing the Plains is. It's a book by Canadian scholar James Descook. The book takes an epidemiological approach and documents the historical roots of modern health disparities between Canadians and Indigenous peoples living what is now Canada. In so, Descook highlights in particular the role of Canadian policy designed to displace Indigenous populations from their traditional territories to make way for the settlement of the prairies. So in these documents that they have, many of these documents that the Canadian government has not released to the public, some of them that this man, what's his name? James Descook. Sounds like a French name. He was able to uncover some of the policies that were put in place to, what does it say, to displace Indigenous populations from their traditional territories. So these records that the Canadian government have proven to have history on how they treated us. This book is just one example. I would love to know. I would love to know all the documents that Canada has on the history of the treatment of Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous. I want to know it all. Piles of information that they have not released to the public. And historians want to know about it. I as a brother in the ISUPK, I want to know what the Canadian government has on the history of us. This book included policies that amounted to forced starvation. So the government of Canada had records on how they had and implemented forced starvation of Indigenous people. The book implicates numerous government officials, including John A. Macdonald, which is Canada's first prime minister. Now, I grew up in Canada being taught that the Europeans came and they were holding hand in hand with the Indigenous people. They're sitting there having meals of Thanksgiving meals, how much they love each other, how well they're getting along with each other, how Europeans are bringing over technology into the Americas, inside of Canada, and, you know, showing these Indigenous people how to better their lives. All these peaceful trades that they were having. I didn't hear about John A. Macdonald's policy to implement forced starvation on Indigenous people. I was never taught that. John A. Macdonald, Canada's first prime minister, is advocating for and designing such policies. Not only did he advocate for these policies, John A. Macdonald is the devil that the Bible speaks of. He designed these policies. It says, Descook thus builds on the work of scholars such as Sarah Carter, who have highlighted the shortcomings of Canadian Indigenous policies in the settlement period, along with scholarship on the social determinants of health. In an article about his research, Descook argued that these types of policies were part of a process of genocide and ethnic cleansing. I was never taught that about John A. MacDonald. I was never taught that, you know, Sir John A. MacDonald designed policies that helped with the mass genocide of a race of people. That's why it's so important not to learn about history from the people that have colonized you. Because if I wrote a history book about Sir John A. MacDonald, nothing good would be said about that man. It's 1:21. Let me pull up a quick article on, it's just a Wikipedia thing on the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Something that is not taught by Europeans. They don't tell you that when that Etienne Boulay came to Canada, and many of the Jesuits, the Catholics, the European Catholics, the Portuguese, the French, they were a people who read through the Bible, and one of the things that they believed is they encountered a civilization that was so great in North Americas. They ran into people that had such an advanced civilization, advanced way of living. And they were determined to find out that for a nation so big, what did we read? They're down there in the rainforest. They got, you know, numbers in the millions of a civilization that was built down near Brazil and Belize and Ecuador. These nation was so great. They're like, where did these people come from? We want to know where they came from biblically. They must be recorded somewhere in the Bible. There was a book called the 10 Lost Tribes of Israel. Because throughout history, there have been people speculating on where did these 10 tribes go on the earth? We can't find them. They're such a large nations of people. 10 tribes. Where do these people go? We know when we read in the Bible, it says they were exiled from the kingdom of Israel after it was conquered by the Neo-Assyrian Empire around 720 BCE. They list the 10 tribes. They say the kingdom of Judah and therefore survived until the Babylonian siege of Jerusalem in 587 BCE. The exile of Israel's population, known as the Assyrian captivity, was an instance of the long-standing resettlement policy of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, implemented in many subjugated territories. These aren't just Bible stories, as the world would say. These are historical events that the world recognizes as history. It says the Jewish historian Josephus wrote that there are but 2 tribes in Asia, and Europe subject to the Romans, while the 10 tribes are beyond Euphrates till now, and are an immense multitude, and not to be estimated by numbers. Saying these 10 tribes, this is a large group of people. In the 7th and 8th century CE, the return of the 10 lost tribes was associated with the concept of the coming of the Hebrew Messiah. Claims of descent from the lost tribes have been proposed in relation to many groups in some Abrahamic religions, espouse a messianic view that Israel's tribes will concern. So you got people looking at what they call the Abrahamic religion saying, you know, they're giving different perceptions on, you know, where these people might be. If I jump down, it says the scriptural basis. So beyond their different, you know, these different scholars on where these 10 tribes may be, let's look at the scriptural basis regarding these tribes. It says the scriptural basis for the idea of lost tribes is 2 Kings chapter 17 and 6. In the 9th year of Hosea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah and in Harbor and on the river of Gazan and in the cities of Medes. According to the Bible, the kingdoms of Israel and Judah were the successor states to the older united monarchy of Israel. The kingdom of Israel came into existence 930 BCE after the northern tribes of Israel rejected Solomon's son, Rehoboam, as their king. 10 tribes formed the kingdom of Israel. However, it is not clear how Simeon, whose territory was within Judean territory, could have ever been a part of the northern kingdom. Additionally, the territory of Asher was basically Phoenician. Jump down in 732 BCE. Oh, let me go down more, because they're going to the biblical story. It says, according to historian V.I. Ben-Dor Benite, centuries after their disappearance, so we got these 10 tribes that disappeared. It says the 10 lost tribes sent an indirect but vital sign. In 2nd Ezra, we read about the 10 tribes and their long journey through that region, which is called Arzarath. The book of the vision of Ezra, or Ezra's, was written in Hebrew or Aramaic by a Jew in Israel sometime before the end of the 1st century CE, shortly after the destruction of the temple by the Romans. It is one of the group of texts later designated as the so-called Apocrypha. In 2nd, also called 4th Ezra's, it says, and as for your seeing him, a man seen in a vision, gathered to himself another multitude that was peaceable. These are the 10 tribes which were led away from their own land into captivity in the days of King Hosea, whom Salmanassar, the king of Assyrians, led captive. He took them across the river, and they were taken to another land. That word, Arzarath, I believe that's a word that means earth, or a land where, you know, no man had dwelt before. It says they were taken into another land, but they formed this plan for themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the nations and go to a more distant region where mankind had never lived. This is why I say, you know, and I had made the point earlier to say, you should not learn your history from your oppressor. You should not learn your history from the people that colonized you. It's sad that because of things like residential schools, and these Jesuits, these Europeans, these Catholics, the Roman Catholic Church, taught you that the Bible was some book of fairy tales, when Moses said, this is the book of the law. This is a book of history. It's a book of historical records, a book of your culture. If we did what Moses said and we asked our forefather, if we knew who we are, if we knew that we were the children of God, we would look to Ezra to learn about Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous history. But because we don't know who we are, we don't even consider that, wait a minute, Ezra is my uncle. Ezra is my great-great-grandfather. Ezra is writing down in a book the history of the 10 tribes of Israel. We don't even consider that this man is our ancestor. Because right here, we're reading of a mass migration of people that migrated into a land where no man had ever dwelt before. What's interesting is he specifically said that no man had ever dwelt there before. I'm curious to know who lived in North and South Central America before the indigenous people. Because I think Europeans say themselves that this is the new world. This is a undiscovered territory. We never been over here before. That's the Europeans' history. They say nobody was living. This is absolutely crazy. It's absolute insanity. They're going to sit here and say that North and South Central America is this place where the world knows nothing about. And when we came over here, we civilized North and South Central America. You are living under a rock if you believe that garbage. Ezra said that there were 10 nations of people, millions of people, that went to a land where no man had ever lived before. And this is back in 500 BCE. 500 years before Christ, 600 years, 700 years before Christ. You look at a calendar today, that would have been like 2,600 years ago. Ezra, our uncle, said that we came over to a new land. They tell that garbage story of, nobody had boats or nobody was civilized enough to make a boat that could get over the sea. You believe that garbage, you are living under a rock. They came over here and indigenous people were traveling all over North and South Central America by boat. Look it up. They taking boats everywhere. That devil found that artifact in Toronto and said, we got to rewrite history, because how the hell are they getting some iron axe and some iron, smith work or whatever you want to call it over here in North America? 100 years before we've ever made contact with them. And then you learn, wait a minute, indigenous people had boats. They had a way of, they had a extremely sophisticated trade routes that they're able to get this artifact from one place over to another in record time. Why? Because the devil doesn't know anything about our history. You don't know about indigenous peoples. Many times you read historically about how sophisticated the indigenous were. Their government, their laws, their infrastructure. Let me share another video. Something on indigenous people.
Archaeologists were wrong about the Amazon. For years, this rainforest was painted as an untouched wilderness, incapable of supporting complex societies. But new tools are pulling back the canopy and revealing plazas, roads, and engineered soils. It's less of a pristine
plazas, roads, engineered soils,
rainforest, and more of a human-shaped landscape. We're only now beginning to discover the lost cities it's been hiding. And in this video, I want to bring awareness to these mysteries and show how archaeological paradigms can always shift. More specifically, we'll explore outdated myths about the Amazon, the technology that's debunking them, and some truly mind-blowing sites. I'll even take you with me to make our own discovery. So let's dive in. Produce notable soil modifications, so short-term camps leave minimal or ephemeral signatures that are hard to detect after millennia. Third, frequently shifting rivers, sedimentation, and landscape change have buried, eroded, or displaced any ancient settlements. And fourth, thick vegetation and dense canopy mask surface evidence. Because of this, she says that most ancient New World finds come from arid regions or protected under rock shelters, not from the Amazon. So she viewed the Amazon as a natural museum more than a culture by early explorers. Meggers and others claimed that any sophisticated settlements reported by early Europeans must have been exaggerations or misreadings of natural features, or that they were short-lived experiments doomed to collapse.
So back in history, you had Spanish explorers coming back saying what they're finding about indigenous people. And Europeans are like, no, these are exaggerations. This can't be true.
But those reports were more insightful than they knew. Conquistadors like Francisco de Orellana described bustling towns along the Amazon River in the 1500s. His crew pushed into a rainforest that, to European imaginations, should have been empty. Yet, the scenes they recorded were crowded and organized.
He's saying the scenes that they're recording are crowded and organized.
Gaspar de Carvajal described stretches of riverbank lined with large cities, well-developed roads, monumental construction, and dense populations. Where Europeans expected to find primitive camps, they found human-built environments. Imagine sailing on that ship and what it must have been like to encounter a people, an entire world, unlike anything you've ever seen. It must have been equally mind-bending to be an indigenous Amazonian, witnessing this European vessel sail through your territory. Their descriptions paint a vivid picture of large-scale social organization. Whether every detail is literal or filtered through 16th century eyes, the observation is clear. The Amazon they claim to have encountered did not match the speculation of later archaeologists. Now, in the 20th century, we have far more data to sparse out which of these camps was more accurate. and the preponderance of evidence suggests that people like Oriana and Carvajal may not have been exaggerating after all.
Yeah, they're like, what they were writing about indigenous people, it was not exaggerated. We learning about this, I could probably drop that video for time's sake. You know, they're learning about us and researching about us, and they're like, God damn. Look at all the pyramids that they have built in South America. All the infrastructure that they built, all the mass civilizations. Talk about the medical profession, the medical system that they had in these indigenous communities. Like, we really have to stop listening to our oppressor to learn who we are and where we come from. Canada has stacks and stacks of documents that they won't give out to the public. They're finding, daily finding, new civilizations inside of Canada where indigenous people had built up societies. Don't let colonizers tell you who you are. Do not do it. There's information, I'm probably going to have to do a long series. There is so much information, things that debunk the Bering Strait theory. Let's see if I can, for those who don't know what that theory is. This is definitely going to have to be a little series that we get into. This is the Bering Strait theory. Posits that the first peoples to populate the Americas migrated from Asia to North America across a massive dry expanse of land called Beringia. This land bridge was exposed during the last ice age as sea levels dropped, connecting modern-day Siberia and Alaska. Let me tell you, this Bering Strait theory is just a theory. And there is so much archaeological evidence that proves that there is no way that Bering Strait theory is true. It is false. It is garbage. Don't listen to Europeans. Do not do it. Do not let them teach you your history. Because you listen to them, you're going to believe that you're a savage. You're going to believe you're an uneducated Negro, no education, no good father, no good husband, no good wife. You're just a hoe at another strip club shaking your ass on BET. Uneducated, unfit to run a society. Look at how the ghetto and the reservations are. Look at those uncivilized Mexicans over there. You listen to your oppressor, that's what you're going to believe. Should not listen to Europeans for anything when it comes to speaking on our history. Moses said, "For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God has chosen thee to be a special people above all people on the face of the earth." That's your history, black man, Hispanic man, indigenous man. Why do you think Toronto is so great? Why do you think places like New York could be built and thrive? Because blacks and indigenous built it. You think white people sat here and built up Canada? You need hundreds of years of slavery You had blacks and indigenous serve you inside of Canada. Hundreds of years of free labor. You think white people sat here and planned and organized, what do they call it, urban development? You think they planned all that? Hell no. Your black ass sat there and planned it and built it. Built the roads and the infrastructure. That's what slavery was. You listen to some dumbass oppressor tell you that, you know, blacks were uneducated and couldn't read. Who do you think was reading the goddamn blueprint to build this place? Your oppressor is the devil. Don't listen to anything he says. Listen to your forefather. Moses said, "You are above all people on the face of the earth." You're better. You're greater than. You can see it. Just look at nature. Look at who you are. Your mind, how you carry yourself. These other nations are beneath you. They're not above you. When we read about these different indigenous societies inside of the Americas, don't be surprised. We are a civilized, intelligent people. That's our history. Probably going to have to do a series on, you know, all the Taino Indians, the Iroquois, the Métis, the, you know what I mean, the Mohawk, the Cree, the Cherokee, all our history all throughout the Americas. You listen to Europeans, you would think that you had nothing. Shoot, and live in Canada, they're not even gonna, you know, release the information of your history. They're gonna sit here and take all of your artifacts, put it in their museum. All the documents on who you are and your history, they gonna hide that shit. It's going to take people fighting to release those documents for more information to come out. It says in the book of Revelations that, just paraphrasing, the earth helped the woman. And what that's talking about is information, archaeology, records being released on this earth, teaching you about Black, Hispanic, and indigenous history. You see those Russian icons that were released? Oh, now we can't say all the prophets in the Bible are white boys. Russian icons disproved all of that. So we say, Thawada Yahweh, Wa Yahweh Shai. Baraka Tha Yahweh Wa Yahweh Shai. Thanks be to the Most High in his through his Son named Christ, named Yahushua, for these records being released on this earth. It's a beautiful thing. We got about 5 minutes left. Let me play a little bit on this video, then we'll close out the class.
Canada and the capital of Ontario. With nearly 3 million residents in the city itself and more than 6 million in the Greater Toronto Area, it stands as the fourth largest city in North America, anchoring the Golden Horseshoe region. This
is something that Canada needs to get ready for. And it's the ISUPK taking over Canada. Toronto is the 4th largest city in North America. I believe it's just behind New Mexico, Los Angeles, and New York. 4th largest is Toronto. I think the 5th largest is Chicago. Toronto is a large city over here in North America. It's a large city that they built up here in Canada.
Along Lake Ontario, Toronto has grown into an international hub of business, finance, arts, sports, and culture. Today, it is celebrated as one of the most multicultural and cosmopolitan cities in the world.
Today, it's celebrated as one of the most multicultural metropolitans in the world. I looked up the population of Indigenous people inside of Toronto. And I said, well, goddamn. It's like the population is like 80,000. Yeah, mass genocide is a real thing, Canada. The displacement of Indigenous peoples inside of their land is a real thing, Canada. You got the 4th largest city built on top of Indigenous grave sites. And they're damn near nowhere to be found inside of Toronto.
But Toronto's history stretches back long before the modern skyline. Early history of Toronto. The land where Toronto now stands has been significant for thousands of years. Archaeological evidence shows that Indigenous peoples lived and traveled through the area long before Europeans arrived.
This was a place where Indigenous peoples lived and traveled through, and built up villages and cities. And now they are no longer there. People in Toronto should be ashamed of your history. Should be ashamed of it. I think last year in the Eaton Center, they opened up the first Indigenous business ever inside of Toronto in 2025. You should be ashamed, Toronto. This place used to belong to the Indigenous. And Canada built the 4th largest city in all of North America, right here in Toronto. You're going to see the ISUPK all over Toronto. All over Toronto. You're going to see.
The site lay at the entrance of one of the oldest and most important routes to the northwest, used by the Huron, Iroquois, and Ojibwe nations.
So one of the most important sites for the Huron, Iroquois, and Ojibwe nations. You got to tune in to this class every Monday. All right. I'm going to start gearing these classes heavily towards Canadian history. You know what I mean? For some topics, we might get into, you know, a little bit more of North American history, history in America, Caribbean islands. We're going to get into all that. But Canada needs, you know what I mean, some of its history to be brought out, to be taught from the lens of a Black man, not the lens of some disgusting European historian. That's what these classes are going to be. Tune in every Monday night, 7 till 9 p.m. You know what I mean? We're going to get through this information. There's tons of information. You know what I mean? And according to CBC, a lot more information needs to be released. I pray that the Most High releases that information so Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous can learn about, you know, all the horror stories that the Canadian government has done to our people. All right, we're going to read up on it. We're going to learn our history. All right, tune in every Monday night. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to these classes. ISUPK Toronto, ISUPK Windsor. All right, make sure you subscribe and share these classes. All right, so with that, I'm going to say shalom. Yahweh Shem Ashai Barak a thumb to the brothers. Yahweh Shemal a thumb by Shem Ashai to the sisters. All right, shalom.
Hey, listen, brothers and sisters, man. If you like what you hear, hit the subscribe button, man. Subscribe to this channel. And also, please, go to isupk.com and pay your tithe. Drop me some cash so we can move around this planet like we need to, man, and do the things we need to do.
They're one West. They're one West. They're one West. They're one